switching gears now, focusing on the Champions League group stage draw. Let's react to it. It's in the books. Which Premier League teams did well? Who's maybe not so happy? Nick, I'm going to come to you first. Which Premier League team do you think will be the happiest with their draw in the Champions League? And by the way, you're a Newcastle United fan, so we'll also dig into that as well.
Yeah, the answer is not Newcastle United. That's the answer. Look, I think Man City has to be happy, but I don't know if they're a team that is bowed by challenges at this point. With respect to Leipzig and Red Star and Young Boys, that is a group that they should really waltz through. And, I don't know that anybody can be really mad at their group. Man United won't be happy to see Bayern Munich there, but will certainly expect to get out of the group as the first or second team. As I messaged you guys right away, Harry Kane hat-trick incoming in one of those games, probably at the Allianz Arena. But, Arsenal, Sevilla, that group, it's just, I think this really worked out well for Premier League teams not called Newcastle.
Andy, you agree with that?
Yeah, it worked out for any Premier League team that wasn't in the fourth pot. This is the reality of getting into the Champions League for the first time. And every Premier League club or every club from another league as well, especially from other leagues where the coefficient doesn't quite stack as quickly, this is just the reality of it. And as they progress in it, maybe out of the group stage this year, but if they can get back in next year, or even they can rack up some Europa League points, that starts to get a little bit easier in the future. But until then, this is just kind of what it's going to be life-like in Europe for Newcastle. But I couldn't be more thrilled to watch them, because they've been such a fascinating watch the last year and a half or so, because obviously the money comes into the club and you expect them to go into hyperdrive making signings, and they've spent a good amount of money, but it doesn't feel like it's been egregious and over the top the way that it has been at some clubs when they've had takeovers. And they have done a lot of their progressing and growing and improving on the field, not just in the transfer market. And I think a lot of credit for that needs to go to Eddie Howe. I know you had some questions from what happened over the weekend against Liverpool, but they are going to make that group very interesting. They probably won't get out of it, but of the four teams, I think they are the one that has the potential probably. It's crazy to think that a team that has that money would be causing upsets in any competition, but I can see them knocking off a couple of the bigger sides, and then maybe losing one at home that they probably shouldn't, and that maybe seals their fate to drop down into the Europa League. But even that, again, for the coefficient, will be very beneficial for them.
Yeah, Newcastle fans, it's great. Paris, Milan, Dortmund, great away days, but it's going to be tough for Eddie Howe's side for sure. Nick, which matches are we most looking forward to? You mentioned one of there, probably Man United Bayern is right at the top of everyone's list, but there's Napoli, obviously in the same group as Real Madrid, is one that catches the eye as well. But there's some really tasty matchups in the group stage.
Yeah, there really are. Again, that fourth pot has really given us a lot of interesting situations. Lens is a decent side. Union Berlin is a decent side. There's a lot to like there. I guess the thing I'm most interested in is to see how Arsenal fare, because I think there isn't an easy game in the group for them, but even with Sevilla, a tournament monster, I think they'll be expected to win that group. And the expectations so far and how Mikel Arteta deals with them make every game they're involved with an interesting one for me. But in terms of the pick a game, Arsenal-Sevilla is going to be interesting. You mentioned Bayern and Man United. You mentioned Napoli and Real Madrid. I will give you one more that I think could be a lot of fun, and that is AC Milan against Newcastle. As Sandro Tonali, a boyhood AC Milan fan who most fans did not want to see go. Stripes on both sides obviously can't happen, but I think that whole group will be very, very interesting.
Andy, is that the group of death? Group F? Is it pretty obvious?
Yeah, PSG, Dortmund, Milan, and Newcastle for all the reasons that we just established. Name one, a bad matchup to watch in that group. Two, name an easy game where you can say, oh, that's 3 points for literally any team in the group. So yeah, it's going to be the group of death. Every single game from that group should probably be on your first screen while you've got multiple screens going for Champions League on the Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The quality and also the importance and the weight, what is on the line. Every single game is going to be so important in that group. I'm really, I know I've said this already, I'm really excited for that group.
Yeah, in terms of like upsets, we're going to have some predictions here for maybe teams who are going to make the last 16 unexpectedly, because I'm looking at Group E. Atletico Madrid, obviously, they are a mainstay at this stage, but Feyenoord, Lazio, Celtic, one of those teams are going to be in the last 16. And I think you could probably see Lazio sneaking in there, Nick. I don't know. I mean, I know you watch a lot of Serie A, and they've been really solid the last few years. But Celtic, I don't know how they're going to do under Brendan Rodgers. Haven't had a big summer in the transfer window. And Feyenoord, again, you just never quite know with some of those young players they have if they're going to step up. But I'm intrigued to see who comes out of that group. But I think I'm going to go with Lazio to be a bit of a surprise package of the Champions League this year.
Listen, I think that group, Celtic, is another group that has to be very happy with its draw, because they're obviously Atletico Madrid. They're not going to be favored against them. But in every single one of those games, you can give yourself a puncher's chance. And I think there's reason to be excited if you're any team in that group. But I do seem to think you're right with Lazio. If I look at other groups, I don't know about Leipzig this year. I think there is a chance for Red Star or Young Boys to be a surprise package. But I will say this, if I'm AC Milan, just going back to that group, will you have to see with all those teams except PSG, and even with PSG as they face some turnover, will you see teams that have to decide what to focus on? Because when I saw the group draw, I went from, hey, maybe they'll win to the Europa League, to how is this going to affect their bid to get back into the top four? And I think that's what a group of death really asks of you. And I honestly hate to be dramatic here. And you guys know, back to Alan Shearer in Black and White, I've watched Newcastle. I really was going to be a cheeky, they'll win the Europa League guy. And I'm looking at this group and thinking, could they finish fourth? And then also, because of the big ask we're asking of them in the Champions League, be in a picture to just forget about the top four by Christmas.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Andy, based on the group stage draw, any changes in your mind about predicting who's going to win the whole thing? Who are you thinking Man City going to repeat? I mean, it looks pretty easy for them in the group stage, but most games seem pretty easy for City right now.
Yeah, based on the information we have now, no, not changing the opinion that Manchester's, because all we know is that they'll have a couple tough games against Leipzig. We'll see them get challenged a little bit, but then you think back to the knockout rounds of last season. What happened when Manchester City played Leipzig? And you're not worried. So at this point, they're still the favorites. I do think another Red Bull team, though, to kind of tie together the last two questions that you've asked, Joe, I think Salzburg, they have the recruitment down every single season. They always have two or three players that, you know, the advanced stat nerds, if you will, are keen on and they're hip to, and then they explode onto the scene in the Champions League or in the Europa League. Just watch out for them in a group that's not overly difficult with Benfica, Inter Milan, and Real Sociedad. They could get through and be one of the teams in the round of 16.
Nick, who do you fancy?
Yeah, I still fancy Manchester City, but I just have a feeling about Bayern this year. Harry Kane has looked ridiculous. He has answered just about all those questions we had. What would Kane look like at Man City? What would Kane look like at Man United? Well, we kind of know that because of what we saw when Tottenham was at its very best. But he is facilitating. He's dropping in deep and getting assists. He's finishing so many chances. I mean, he's going to put up absurd numbers this year. And Lewandowski had his day. And I think Harry Kane is potentially going to have his day. And I mean, Bayern Munich and Man City, pick whichever one you want to be 1-2. I think this is a really strong group. And I also I think Andy just mentioned Real Sociedad. I think they could be a sneaky team with the way they play.
Definitely. I'm just going to remove that dagger you drove into Andy's heart by saying Harry Kane.
I'm sorry.
The Champions League trophy at Bayern. But we'll see who wins it all. We'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. All the latest for the Champions League throughout the season. Big reactions to the draw. Obviously, Premier League teams for the most part did well. 3 out of the 4 were pretty happy with that draw. Newcastle, at least there's some good cities to visit, and we'll see exactly where they're stacking up against some of the biggest teams in Europe. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll keep you updated on PST.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock. And be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you there.